Bonjour à toutes et à tous et merci de nous joindre dans la salle de presse virtuelle de la Commission européenne pour notre rendez-vous quotidien en ligne. Et merci de nous suivre également en direct sur Europe by Satellite aujourd'hui, mardi 30 mars. Permettez-moi d'abord de vous communiquer une mise à jour de l'agenda de la présidente von der Leyen. Le mardi prochain, donc le 6 avril, la présidente von der Leyen et le président du Conseil européen, Charles Michel, seront en visite à Ankara pour une rencontre avec le président turc Erdogan. Le programme de la visite est toujours en préparation et donc nous allons vous communiquer des détails sur cette visite dans les jours à venir. Je passe maintenant la parole à Balash qui vous donnera des nouvelles sur notre programme SURE et notre soutien à l'emploi dans l'Union européenne.
Good afternoon. So the European Commission has disbursed 13 billion euro to 6 EU member states in the sixth installment of financial support under the SURE instrument. This is the third disbursement this year, and as part of today's operations, Czechia has received 1 billion euro, Belgium 2.2 billion euro, Spain 4.06 billion, Ireland 2.47 billion, Italy 1.87 billion, and Poland 1.4 billion. Now, these loans will allow member states in tackling sudden increases in public expenditure to preserve employment. Overall, until now, 17 EU member states have received a total of 75.5 billion euro under the SURE instrument in back-to-back loans. Now, on top of today's disbursements, the Commission is also proposing to the Council to provide an additional 3.7 billion euro to 6 member states today under SURE. Now, this includes an additional 394 million euro for Belgium, 125 million euro for Cyprus, 2.5 billion euro for Greece, 113 million for Latvia, 355 million for Lithuania, and 177 million for Malta. This brings the total financial assistance proposed by the Commission under SURE to 94.3 billion euro overall for 19 member states.
Thank you very much, Balash. And finally, following yesterday's kickoff to the European Year of the Rail, EU transport ministers meet today virtually. And rail is naturally at the top of their agenda. The ministers will discuss rail modernization, its social and economic importance, and its crucial role helping Europe reach the goal of climate neutrality by 2050. A joint press conference is scheduled around 1 o'clock. Commissioner Adina Vălean will take part, and you can follow that press conference on Europe by Satellite. As usual, we kindly invite you to reserve questions related to transport for that press conference. And now we are ready to take your questions. So let's see who wishes to exchange with us today. I see that Atanasio has his hand raised. So Atanasios, go ahead.
Thanks a lot. Bonjour. I got a rule of law issue that I need to bring to your attention. You might have followed the Georgiou case. He is the Greek statistician who restored the accuracy of Greek statistics following the events of 2009 and the fraud in the Greek statistics that preceded 2009. If you remember, it was a prior action for the disbursement of some tranches under the Greek program that Georgiou was exonerated of all false charges against him that were brought against him in the court of law in Greece. If you remember, he was brought to justice for various falsified accusations of technically inflating the deficit figures and so forth. And it was, obviously not the case, and the Eurogroup and the European Council called Greece to exonerate him. Unfortunately, he's still under trial after 10 years, and he's facing the consequences of some side case stemming from the original case. So What is your reaction to that? What should Greece do? And anticipating your answer and possibly the line that you don't interfere in the judicial affairs and so forth, I need to remind you that it was a prior action. It was an official prior action that the Greek authorities take some action in order to exonerate the statistician who restored the accuracy of Greek statistics. And second question, what kind of rule of law state is that when a man who was obviously on the right side of history and did his job properly is still under trial, while everybody else who perpetrated the actual fraud of the 2006-2009 years are still roaming freely, and no one was brought to justice, no justice was done for them. Thanks, tell me.
Thank you very much, Athanasios, and thank you also for trying to anticipate our lines to take. So with that, I will give the floor to Christian to see what we can answer to your specific question today. Christian, are you there?
Yes, thanks, Athanasios. Well, you will remember that in the previous mandate, I have several times commented on this, and we indeed have a very clear position in this context. However, I must say that this is actually was with my former head on employment and statistics, Eurostat specifically. So I would have to see whether Marta has something more up to date on this than I could offer you today.
Thank you, Christian, for offering your help with your previous experience. Marta is signaling to me that she will be getting back to Athanasios with an update on this specific case. Thank you so much. I will now give the floor to Patricia. Patricia, go ahead. Oh, I'm sorry. I understand that Athanasios has a follow-up. So, of course, we take that first.
No, I'm sorry. It's not a follow-up. It's a different question. I'll wait my turn again.
It's okay. You can go ahead, Athanasios.
All right. So I was wondering, why is not the European Commission one of the signatories of the call of the President of the European Council for a global pandemics treaty?
Thank you very much for your question, Athanasios. I am not sure what exactly you refer to. We work very closely with the President of the European Council on future pandemic preparedness. And there are many instances in which we work together. For instance, as you surely know, the President von der Leyen will co-host on the 21st of May, together with the Italian Prime Minister, the Global Health Summit, which will have pandemic preparedness on its agenda. And in that context, there are lots of contacts and mutual support for ideas on how to make the world be better prepared to prevent and to tackle pandemics. And you may refer, for instance, to various articles, including an op-ed which was published recently and which had a number of signatures. It's for sure not complete in terms of list of signatures, and I'm sure that more than the signatories find the idea of improving, boosting preparedness, whether through a treaty, a convention, or any other suitable form attractive. But again, let me to conclude and emphasize that there is strong cooperation going on between the President and the President of the European Council on future pandemic preparedness. Thank you for that. Now I go back to Patricia, who had her hand raised. Patricia, are you still there? Patricia, you just need to press speak, and then you will be with us.
Okay, perfect. Thank you, Dana. Actually, my question is relating to the same thing that Athanasios asked you. So when you say that the list of signatories is not complete, you allude to the fact that probably President von der Leyen will sign it as well. This is my question. Thank you.
Patricia, allow me to emphasize that there is union of sort of views in terms of getting to the objective, which is a shared one, which is to improve preparedness and to improve preparedness for preventing pandemics in the future. This includes many ways through which that could be achieved. And the President is very happy to work closely with the President of the European Council on this specific proposal regarding the treaty and on others as well, which may be put on the table specifically at that Global Health Summit. Indeed, there is an op-ed that has been published in several European newspapers, signed by several European leaders and leaders from other parts of the world as well. Probably there will be more leaders that would be supporting that view than those that have signed it at this specific point in time, but it doesn't mean that the way in which we express union of views or the range of options that we have to address preparedness is simply through an op-ed which was published at a specific point in time in several newspapers. Thank you for that. Allow me now to give the floor to Quentin. Quentin.
Oui, bonjour, est-ce que vous m'entendez?
Oui, Quentin, tout va bien, vas-y.
Oui, Quentin, tout va bien, vas-y. And may I ask my question in English because it might be easier for everyone, but would it be possible to have an update on the talks between the Commission and the British government regarding vaccines cooperation? Do you have a meeting to be announced? Do you have some kind of a deadline? Like, should we expect to have a deal before everyone goes on a well-deserved Easter break? Anyway, so what can you tell us about this? Thanks.
Thank you for the question, Quentin. I have no fresh information to offer on top of what I said yesterday. You will have to remember the negotiations are not a linear process. There are moments when people meet face-to-face. There are moments when people these days meet screen to screen, and there are moments when the teams, the partners that negotiate, prepare on their side for the next stage or for the next steps. We do not have a deadline, and we never had a deadline or not even a time horizon that we were tending towards. This is not a sprint. This is not a matter that is focused on one just specific small circumvented issue and which needs to be resolved in a matter of days. This is a broader and more complex process. It pertains to the cooperation that we wish to have with the UK on complex and important processes linked to the production of vaccines from the along the whole chain, supply chain, but even broader than that, pertaining to research and other phases. So there is no timeline that I can share with you or specific event that I can point to. I understand your question in relation to wanting us to close this before we head for some holidays before the end of the week. Believe me, if there is an announcement to make or a result to announce or a stock taking to conduct, you will know it. We will keep you closely informed about that. So at this stage, I will invite you to keep your hand raised if you have additional questions on this subject. And I believe that Quentin has a follow-up question. Go ahead.
I do. It's maybe a more question for Miriam than for you, Dana. Would it be possible to have some kind of a state of play on how many requests of vaccines export to the United Kingdom were authorized or were in the process of being evaluated by the Commission and Member States since the new regulation entered into force on Thursday? Do you have anything on that? Thanks.
Thank you, Quentin. Miriam has some well-deserved holidays, and Balash will present you the freshest data.
Indeed, you will have to put up with me for 2 weeks on trade-related files. So the latest figures I have go from the 30th of January until the 23rd of March. So during this period, the member states approved 380 requests for export authorizations, and the total number of doses exported is, according to my latest figures, 43 million.
Thank you, Balash. Please keep your hand raised at this stage if you have questions for Balash, in particular on export of vaccines, which is the topic that we are discussing right now. So, James, I understand that your question is about the export of vaccines. So in that case, please go ahead.
Yes, thanks, Dana. I guess what I'm trying to understand is why our information, or my information, is that the President was offered a chance to sign the op-ed and chose not to. So what exactly is it about this call for affordable, safe and equitable access to vaccines that she finds so objectionable? And is there any chance that she will sign it at some point today?
Dear James, I'm not sure I got your question completely. So does your question refer to the op-ed published regarding the Treaty on Preparing for Future Pandemics, or what are you referring to exactly? So I would be grateful if you could repeat it.
Sure, no problem. So yes, it refers to the op-ed which was signed by 8 leaders of EU member states and Charles Michel, the President of the European Council. The leaders include Angela Merkel, Emmanuel Macron. It's quite a big news story overnight. So it's my information that Ursula von der Leyen was asked if she would sign this op-ed and refused. I'd like to know why she refused. What is it that she disagreed with about this treaty for pandemics? Thank you.
Thank you for your specific question, James. I cannot confirm the information here from this podium whether the President was explicitly asked to sign a specific text which was published in a few European newspapers today. What I can tell you is that there is a complete agreement between the President and the signatories of this op-ed, and for sure more than the signatories of op-ed, because there are 19 other European leaders that haven't signed it, which does not mean in any way that they will not share the goal of bringing the world towards a situation of being better prepared to prevent and face pandemics. So we are talking about a specific text which was published at a point in time in certain newspapers and signed by several European leaders. Again, the President of the European Commission shares completely and actually is a prominent actor, player in this move and work to bring the world together to be better prepared for future pandemics. And there will be contributions, whether in writing in the form of op-eds or exchanges in the form of conference, or actually financial contributions or work done otherwise in order to help the world be better prepared for pandemics. And this cannot be limited to the appearance of a specific text in newspapers at a point in time. Again, let me emphasize that there is convergence of views regarding the final objective and also the panoply of various ways in which we can together bring the world there. I will try to, yes, James has a follow-up question. Go ahead, James.
Yeah, thank you, Dana. I'll be brief. You said you can't confirm that von der Leyen was offered the chance to sign this op-ed. So can you deny she was offered the chance to sign that op-ed?
Dear James, at this specific point in time here, I do not have the information, to the best of my knowledge, to provide you an answer on approaches regarding this particular article. And that's all I can say about this. I will now open the floor again to questions for Balash about exports of vaccines. This is the topic which was opened earlier by the question from Quentin. So please keep your hand raised at this stage if you have questions for Balash on this topic. Angela has a question for Balash. Go ahead, Angela.
No, actually, my question was about the WHO, the report on COVID, and what James was asking before about the OPED. So if we can keep on this, I can ask my question. Can I?
I would prefer to take the questions for Balash because he's on stage about exports of vaccines because that's the chapter in which we are. And I will duly give you the floor in a few minutes after we have completed the questions for Balash. So please only keep your hand raised at this stage if you have a question for Balash on the export of vaccines. And I believe Griselda has a question for Balash. Griselda, go ahead.
Merci beaucoup. Je voulais savoir si dans les 43 millions de doses, il y avait les doses COVAX aussi, et si elles étaient incluses la partie de doses découvertes en Italie. Je crois que c'était 16 millions, nous, qui devaient aller à COVAX. Et bien sûr, savoir qu'est-ce qui se passe avec les autres, si elles ont été déjà partagées ou elles vont être partagées dans les États membres. Merci.
Oui, donc comme Myriam l'a expliqué à plusieurs occasions, les pays COVAX sont exemptés sous ce mécanisme. Donc voilà, les exportations qui partent vers les pays COVAX ne sont pas inclus dans les chiffres que j'ai présentés. En ce qui concerne les vaccins dont les exports n'ont pas été autorisés, de l'Italie, je pense que c'est pour l'entreprise de décider sur le destin des vaccins, donc je ne vais pas pouvoir partager davantage de détails là-dessus.
Merci beaucoup Balash. Est-ce qu'il y a d'autres questions pour Balash au sujet des exportations des vaccins à ce stade? Je pense que David veut poser une question là-dessus. David, vas-y.
Oui, merci. J'ai deux questions en effet. La première, est-ce que le mécanisme prévoit que les entreprises vous informent des exportations pour COVAX? C'est-à-dire, est-ce que vous disposez de l'information de combien de vaccins destinés à COVAX sont exportés par l'Union européenne, dans l'Union européenne, et est-ce qu'il y en a de vaccins produits dans l'Union européenne qui sont exportés pour COVAX? Deuxième question, apparemment les douanes italiennes ont bloqué des vaccins contre la méningite de GlaxoSmithKline, parce qu'ils veulent tester pour voir s'ils ne sont pas des vaccins contre le Covid. Je voulais savoir si c'était des vaccins destinés aux États-Unis, si j'ai bien compris. Je voulais savoir si vous avez été informé et si ça rentre dans ce mécanisme de contrôle des exportations. Merci.
Merci beaucoup. Balash.
Donc, sur la première question, comme je l'avais dit, lorsqu'il s'agit des exportations vers les pays COVAX, les entreprises n'ont pas le devoir de notifier les autorités des États membres et la Commission, vu que les pays COVAX sont exemptés du mécanisme. Donc, je pense que c'est clair. La deuxième question concernant s'il y a des vaccins produits en Europe qui sont ensuite envoyés vers les pays COVAX. Donc je pense que c'est plutôt une question pour Sonia, ou pas. Mais on va devoir vérifier ça. Et la troisième question, si tu pourrais me rappeler ta troisième question, David.
Oui, les douanes italiennes ont fait un contrôle sur un vaccin méningite de GlaxoSmithKline à destination, ont bloqué une fourniture de ce vaccin à destination des États-Unis. Ils veulent faire un contrôle pour voir si ce n'est pas des vaccins Covid. Vous avez une agence Bloomberg qui a donné la nouvelle, entre autres, et je voulais savoir si la Commission a été informée de ça et si ça rentre dans ce mécanisme de transparence et contrôle des exportations.
Oui, donc ce que je peux te dire, c'est que les États-Unis ne sont pas exemptés du mécanisme. Néanmoins, sur la question spécifique que tu cites, je vais devoir me renseigner et revenir vers toi au cours de l'après-midi.
Voilà, mais juste pour compléter l'information que Balash va t'apporter plus tard, comme tu le sais, le mécanisme sur la transparence et l'autorisation des exportations des vaccins couvre les compagnies avec lesquelles nous avons conclu des Advanced Purchase Agreements pour les vaccins Covid. Donc, ce que tu mentionnes me semble être au-delà du scope, disons, de l'objectif du territoire d'application de notre règlement, mais bien évidemment, Balash va vérifier le détail pour pouvoir t'apporter une réponse plus complète. Et pour le reste, pour compléter également sur les productions des vaccins qui pourraient être destinés pour COVAX par des compagnies qui produisent en Europe, c'est les compagnies qui pourront apporter plus de précisions là-dessus. Comme COVAX ou les productions pour COVAX sont exemptées du devoir de reporting, nous n'avons pas des informations là-dessus. Donc, je garde les sujets ouverts sur les exportations des vaccins de l'Europe. Et donc, je donne la parole à d'autres collègues qui seraient intéressés de poser des questions là-dessus. Je vois plusieurs mains levées. Donc, Francesco, it's your turn.
Hi, good morning. Just a little clarification on what appears to be a contradiction between what von der Leyen said and what Borrell wrote on his blog, I think on Friday. Von der Leyen is saying that 77 million doses have been exported since December, excluding COVAX. While Borrell, in his blog, last week said that 46 million doses have been exported since December, and then he adds that 31 million have been exported to COVAX. So can you clarify that these 77 million are only to non-COVAX countries? And then in addition to the 77 million, there are also doses that have transited through Europe to be then delivered to COVAX countries. And can you please correct, in that case, the blog from Borrell, because it would be misleading. Thanks.
Thank you very much for your question, Francesco. I cannot comment on the specific text in the blog of the HRVP in relation to this. In relation to the vaccines exports, what I can reassure you is that the figures that were presented by the President last week to the European Council and that the President made available herself afterwards are the correct ones. And that means that according to the data that we have obtained under the Transparency and Authorization mechanism, since the 1st of December, 77 million indeed were exported, and this doesn't include the COVAX countries, because the COVAX mechanism has always been exempted from the application of this mechanism. But the colleagues working with HRVP will, of course, look into the details of the figures given in that blog to see if they could give a different impression in relation to that. So, do we have additional questions today on vaccines exports? For Balash, therefore. I believe that Isabel has a question. Isabel, vas-y.
Oui, bonjour. Je voudrais revenir un peu sur la question de Griselda, parce que, donc, si j'ai bien compris, sur les 29 millions de doses, il y en avait 13 millions qui ont été découvertes en Italie, 13 millions qui étaient pour COVAX. Moi, selon mes informations, il y a des vérifications en cours pour vérifier que c'est bien COVAX. Donc, je voulais de votre part savoir comment on vérifie en fait que les compagnies envoient bien des doses à COVAX et que c'est pas une manière d'exporter autrement. Et je suis un peu surprise parce que il y avait suffisamment de défiance vis-à-vis d'AstraZeneca pour ordonner ces inspections en Italie. Et là, on a l'impression que aussi bien sur les 16 millions de doses européennes que sur les 13 millions pour COVAX, vous les prenez, enfin vous acceptez la version d'AstraZeneca. Donc voilà, je voulais savoir si tel était le cas ou s'il y avait des vérifications supplémentaires qui étaient en cours. Merci.
Merci beaucoup pour ta question, Isabelle. En ce qui concerne l'origine et surtout la destination pour les doses du vaccin AstraZeneca qui se trouvent au site de Fill and Finish à Catalante en Italie, c'est la compagnie elle-même qui a donné des détails dans un communiqué de presse la semaine dernière, et c'est la compagnie elle-même qui a expliqué qu'il y avait une partie qui était destinée pour des pays COVAX et qu'une autre partie était destinée pour les pays de l'Union européenne. Nous n'avons pas plus de précisions à apporter là-dessus. C'est pour la compagnie d'expliquer, disons, en fonction de ses chaînes de production, des lignes de production, l'origine et la destination de ces doses. Nous ne suivons pas d'une telle manière la logistique des envois de la compagnie. Bien évidemment, nous sommes en contact à travers les steering boards avec toutes les compagnies avec lesquelles nous avons des accords pour nous assurer que nous recevons la quantité de doses qui ont été promises à l'Union européenne, et c'est cela qui concentre notre attention. Mais pour tous les autres détails techniques de leur ligne de production et de la provenance des substances et la destination, au cas où la destination sont les pays COVAX, c'est aux autorités de la compagnie, c'est à la compagnie que tu dois t'adresser. Je pense qu'Isabelle a un follow-up. Vas-y, Isabelle.
Oui, mais dans ces cas-là, Dana, je ne comprends pas l'intérêt des inspections. C'est-à-dire que vous faites une inspection parce que vous ne les croyez pas, ils vous donnent une explication, et là, vous les croyez, il n'y a pas de vérification supplémentaire.
Si, pour relancer Isabelle, l'inspection était effectuée, d'après mes connaissances, par les autorités italiennes. Et donc, c'est les autorités italiennes qui auraient peut-être plus d'informations à ce sujet. Je continue de donner la parole pour des questions en relation avec l'exportation des vaccins, et je pense que the next on my list is Verena. If the question is for Balash on exports.
Hi, thanks for the question. I'm not entirely sure if Balash is the right person to answer, but you will know. Could you update us on the status of those 29 million doses in Italy? Commissioner Breton said on Friday that they did come from Halix, or at least part of them did come from Halix, and that the factory in Halix has been authorized by EMA in the meantime. So these doses should actually be ready to go, and at least the 16 million that were destined for the EU. So maybe you could say when this is going to be delivered. Thank you.
Thank you for the question, Verena. The question regarding the doses of the AstraZeneca vaccine found at Helix would more be for the health team. So that would be for Vivian this week, replacing Stefan. But I'm not sure how much additional information we can give you at this stage about the whereabouts and destination of this. As said, we simply expect the company to meet its delivery schedule for March, and this is where our attention is focused on. Vivian, on
Thanks.
the doses.
Unfortunately, indeed. I mean, not in a much better position compared to yesterday with the information that I've been provided here, which is that from the 29 million doses, we indeed understand that there are the 16 million doses that are foreseen for EU member states. And for us, it's of course very important that those are then delivered with efficiency and speed as soon as possible. Thanks.
Thank you, Vivian. Verena has a follow-up question. Go ahead, Verena.
Thanks for this, but could you update us where the AstraZeneca deliveries stand at this point today, 30th of March? Thank you.
Yes, when it comes to the deliveries by the companies, then that is of course something which is in between the company and the member states who have given in their specific orders. When you ask about the more general figures, then, well, you know the situation where we are in with AstraZeneca, and for the figures that were foreseen for the first quarter, we have now been informed that there are these shortfalls, and that's the situation where we are in. I'm afraid I don't have any more fresher figures to give you, unfortunately, than what have been available so far.
Indeed, and just to complement what Vivian was saying, the important point is that indeed the physical deliveries of vaccines to timelines and places indicated by the member states are discussed strictly between the member states and the companies, and we do not have real-time data. But of course, as you have been seeing in recent weeks, we are providing weekly updates on the deliveries to that date, and we are hoping to provide you an update tomorrow or in the following days as to where we stand on the actual deliveries that took place beyond the expected deliveries, which are discussed in the broader groups of the steering board. But again, the physical deliveries, what actually reached the member states at a specific point in time, is data which we need to collect from the member states with the member states, and we are not able to offer at this point a real-time conclusion as to the exact level of deliveries. I remind you the data that was provided last week to the European Council. So as of the end of last week, there were 88 million doses that had been delivered. We are 5 days after that, so of course more deliveries took place, and we hope to be able to give you the updated data tomorrow or the day after tomorrow. Any additional questions on deliveries or vaccines and vaccination in general? So for the health part of it, which would be for Vivian, who's on stage. So questions for Vivian on that? I believe that James has a question for Vivian on deliveries. So go ahead, James.
No, I'm sorry, it's not for Vivian on deliveries. It's a question about vaccine and vaccine exports in general.
Then I would invite you to wait a little bit, and I may need to get Balash back on stage. But let's stay with questions for Vivian. Virginie, est-ce que ta question est pour Vivian sur les vaccinations et les doses? Virginie.
Est-ce que vous m'entendez?
Tout va bien, nous t'entendons.
Vous m'entendez? Je ne sais pas si c'est pour Balash ou Viviane, il y a un moment, ça devient trop compliqué, donc c'est sur les vaccins. J'ai plusieurs questions. D'abord, tu as dit que l'Italie avait d'elle-même envoyé des inspecteurs à l'usine italienne d'Astra. Ce n'est pas du tout ce que vous disiez, je ne te parle pas de toi à cette estrade, mais à la Commission la semaine dernière. C'est la Commission qui a mis des doutes, et donc l'Italie s'est dit, oui, c'est vrai, ils ont raison, on va l'inspecter. Donc, je ne comprends pas pourquoi tu dis ça aujourd'hui, première chose. Deuxième chose, il y a une question très simple qu'a posée Isabelle à laquelle vous n'avez pas répondu. Quand une entreprise décide d'exporter des vaccins pour COVAX, est-ce que vous avez un moyen de vérifier que ces exportations sont bien pour COVAX? Voilà, c'est quand même pas compliqué de répondre à cette question. Merci.
Merci beaucoup pour tes encouragements, Virginie, que ce n'est pas compliqué de répondre à ces questions. Nous allons prendre ça au cœur. Donc sur la première question, peut-être qu'on s'est mal comprise. Donc c'est l'Italie qui a effectué les inspections. Donc c'est l'Italie qui a envoyé les personnes sur place pour vérifier. Ce n'est pas quelque chose que la Commission européenne fait. Évidemment, il y a des contacts très étroits entre les autorités nationales qui sont concernées par des demandes d'autorisation des vaccins, comme tu sais, des exportations des vaccins. Comme tu sais, nous avons un processus très structuré en place qui implique un échange très étroit entre les autorités nationales qui sont appelées à émettre une opinion sur une autorisation d'exportation et la Commission. Donc, encore une fois, c'est l'Italie qui a envoyé physiquement les inspecteurs sur place et évidemment, nous sommes en contact étroit avec l'Italie sur comment organiser les choses pour s'assurer que les livraisons des vaccins et que les autorisations des vaccins dans l'Union européenne se passent dans les meilleures conditions. Sur la deuxième chose, je pense que nous pouvons seulement répéter à ce stade que les compagnies ne doivent pas soumettre aux autorités nationales et à la Commission, comme Balash vient de l'expliquer, les demandes d'autorisation pour les vaccins COVAX, parce que les vaccins COVAX étaient à destination des pays COVAX, je veux dire, étaient et continuent d'être exemptés par l'application du mécanisme. Quant à la possibilité pour la Commission et surtout pour les autorités nationales où la production, les fill and finish ou d'autres actions dans la chaîne de production des vaccins se passent, comme tu le sais, à travers l'action non seulement des États membres, mais également des membres du collège qui sont en contact très étroit avec les compagnies et qui visitent eux-mêmes physiquement des compagnies. Nous pensons qu'on a deux moyens d'avoir des informations pertinentes sur ce que se passe dans les usines où il y a des vaccins ou des substances actives pour les vaccins qui sont produits dans l'Union européenne. Et encore une fois, nous prenons toutes les mesures à travers le travail de la task force sur la production des vaccins et à travers notre coopération très étroite avec les autorités nationales, ou bien au sein du steering board, ou bien par les biais des contacts nationaux, d'avoir une vue d'ensemble et pour s'assurer que les choses se passent dans la manière dont ça devrait se passer. Voilà, j'espère que c'était, comme tu dis, simple. Virginie, tu as une question de suivi.
Oui, est-ce que vous m'entendez? Oui, toujours. Je n'ai pas bien compris. Vous m'entendez? Oui, je n'ai pas bien compris. Est-ce que d'une manière ou d'une autre, vous vérifiez, je n'ai pas dit que vous donniez une autorisation, vous vérifiez que les exportations censées être destinées à des pays COVAX vont bien vers des pays COVAX? Voilà, est-ce que vous vérifiez ça ou pas? Je veux dire, vous avez dans le nouveau mécanisme, enfin, dans le durcissement du mécanisme, vous avez exclu des pays parce que justement, vous craignez qu'il y ait des contournements. Donc, j'ai bien compris que vous n'avez pas exclu COVAX parce que, voilà, ça ne se fait pas. Mais est-ce que d'une manière ou d'une autre, vous vérifiez que ces exportations COVAX vont bien dans les pays COVAX? Merci.
Nous sommes dans des contacts très étroits avec les compagnies elles-mêmes et avec les autorités nationales des pays où les productions se passent pour nous assurer que effectivement la production des vaccins se passe dans les meilleures conditions et que les vaccins qui doivent aller vers les pays COVAX, qu'ils soient produits en Europe ou qu'ils soient tout simplement mis en bouteille pour que la phase fill and finish soit faite en Europe, partent effectivement dans les conditions nécessaires vers les pays COVAX. Je pense que ça répond à ta question, je l'espère sinon. Je vous invite désormais à poser d'autres questions à ces sujets. Donc je pense que David, il a une autre question là-dessus. David.
Oui, Dana. La compagnie et le commissaire Breton, à propos des 29 millions de doses trouvées en Italie, avaient dit que les doses auraient été livrées avant la fin du mois de mars. Alors, je comprends que vous continuez à dire transparence d'un côté, après il y a le steering group, donc on ne peut pas le dire, etc. On voudrait savoir si au moins les 10 millions de doses, comme déclaré par AstraZeneca, ou 16 millions de doses, ont été livrées, vont être livrées, quand, etc. Parce qu'on peut continuer tout le temps à faire ces exercices de chat et souris entre nous et vous, mais à la fin de la journée, si vous écoutez les gens qui sont au dehors de la boule européenne, ils vont vous dire c'est un désastre provoqué par l'Union européenne. Et je te l'assure parce que c'est chaque jour comme ça. Et alors peut-être qu'il y a un problème de communication et peut-être que vous devrez parler aux États membres pour être vraiment transparent et expliquer ce qui se passe. Parce que si M. Breton, la semaine passée, me dit que cette semaine, les doses d'AstraZeneca qui ont été trouvées à Rome vont être livrées, il faut lui croire. Est-ce qu'il s'est trompé ? Est-ce qu'il s'est trompé ? C'est ça ma question. Est-ce que M. Breton s'est trompé ?
Merci pour relancer la question, David. Donc, mettons les choses au clair. Il ne s'agit pas d'un jeu, ni des jeux des chats et chiens, ni d'un autre jeu. Il s'agit tout simplement du fait que pour répondre à des questions aussi pointues que combien de doses ont été livrées aujourd'hui à 12h50 vers l'Union européenne par rapport aux doses que nous avons annoncées en toute transparence à la fin de la semaine dernière. Donc je peux tout simplement te dire qu'aujourd'hui, 5 jours plus tard, nous sommes en train de ramasser les données des États membres, de voir exactement combien de doses en plus par rapport à ce que nous avons annoncé ont été délivrées, parce que nous ne voulons pas donner des estimations de ce que nous pensons qui a été délivré, et nous ne voulons pas donner des estimations jusqu'à la fin de la semaine qui sont certes, qui existent, mais qui pourraient être abstraites. Nous voulons donner le nombre exact de doses qui ont été livrées et qui se trouvent les États membres et qui peuvent être administrées aux citoyens européens. Et pour cela, nous collectons des données de 27 États membres. Et donc, je clairement dit, je pense que j'espère que demain ou les jours à venir, nous allons pouvoir vous mettre noir sur blanc les nouveaux nombres de doses qui ont été délivrées dans l'Union européenne. Et bon, cela est aussi lié aux doses du vaccin AstraZeneca qui s'est trouvé la semaine dernière à Catalan. Nous allons avoir des updates de la compagnie ainsi que des États membres qui vont effectivement élucider la question si ces doses sont parties vers les États membres, vers quels États membres, à quel point sont-elles sur les trajets si elles ne sont pas encore là. Mais encore une fois, je vous promets cette information pour les jours à venir. Nous vous avons habitué maintenant, je pense, à une mise à jour hebdomadaire. Nous mettons les chiffres des doses distribuées sur notre site web de la Commission européenne. Nous partageons ces chiffres sur les médias sociaux. Donc, je pense que nous nous sommes livrés à un exercice clair de transparence, mais nous voulons être sûrs des chiffres que nous vous donnons au nom de la Commission européenne. Et pour cela, nous attendons les retours et les vérifications des données à travers les États membres. Merci pour votre patience. Les chiffres ne vont pas tarder. Et je pense qu'on va continuer avec ce sujet sur les livraisons des vaccins. Et donc, je donnerai la parole à Thomas, si Thomas a toujours une question à ce sujet. Thomas, est-ce que c'est ça? C'est à ce sujet que tu veux poser une question?
Yes, very briefly. Do you know when these 29 billion doses expire? And is there a risk that they simply end up in the bin? Thank you.
Thank you, Thomas. I do not have details about the expiration date for these doses, but I'm very confident that the company would know that and would take the necessary measures to make sure that they reach their destination before that happens. I continue with Tommaso. Tommaso, are you there?
Yes, Good afternoon. Thank you for the floor. It's just a follow-up on the same issue because on AstraZeneca doses on deliveries for the first quarter, Vivian said that there are shortfalls. So can we assume that AstraZeneca will not deliver 30 million doses in the first quarter as was expected, because we are at the March the 30th? So you should have not a complete picture, but something like that. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Well, what I can tell you, and of course I will give the floor to Vivian to complete, is that the last time when we had firm figures, black on white, regarding deliveries by companies, and again that was towards the end of last week, there was indeed a shortfall between the agreed quantity of vaccines that we were expecting for AstraZeneca and the actual delivery. So that was indeed the situation at the end of last week, and this is what Vivian reflected earlier as well. Well, you are absolutely right, Tommaso. The first quarter will finish soon, so this is why I'm actually tomorrow, and we will be very happy to provide you updates, hoping, of course, that in the meantime, in actual deliveries and not promised deliveries, AstraZeneca has made up for that shortfall, and that the targets were reached or are very close to being reached. But that, of course, goes for all companies. AstraZeneca was the company that had an outstanding shortfall in terms of delivery. So, of course, we are extremely keen to see the delivery data for AstraZeneca to date. Vivian, anything else?
No, I think that's fine. I mean, you know that it started with 90 million, then went to 40 million, and then the latest projection is 30 million doses from AstraZeneca. And indeed, as you said, we have 1 day to go, and when we see that when they will have delivered that 30 million, we will have reached our 100 million doses target for the first quarter of this year.
Thank you. We continue on the same subject, I presume, with Oliver, who has his hand raised. Oliver. Oh, I'm sorry. I understand that Tommaso has a follow-up question first. If that's the case, go ahead, Tommaso.
Yes, forgive me, very briefly. Can you remind us what were the figures at the end of last week? Thank you. For us.
I'm not sure I have here the exact figures for Astra from last week, so let me check that, and I'll get back perhaps even during this midday.
Indeed, so 88 million was the total figure, and Vivian will check for additional details that she would be in a position to give you. And with that, Oliver.
Hello. My question is also on vaccine distribution, but rather between the member states of these vaccines that are supposed to come earlier. The world favors 10 million doses from BioNTech, Pfizer, which have caused such an interest, especially amongst a prime minister from a country I know quite well. Does the Commission think, even though I know you always say that it's the member states who have to sort of, bash their heads in and find a solution amongst themselves, do you think it would be a good idea if those member states that have huge stocks of vaccines right now would redistribute them quickly now to those, 5 or 6 member states that became victims of AstraZeneca's failure to deliver on time? And would you would the Commission sort of step in and encourage everyone around the table to come up with a solution? Because as things stand now in COREPER and in the steering group, there's one country that's actually vetoing the distribution of the whole 100 million of BioNTech Pfizer. So not only the 10 million that are supposed to come earlier now, but also the 90 million of the same batch that come in autumn. Thank you.
Thank you, Oliver. So that is indeed for Vivian on the discussions taking place in COREPER.
As we speak, almost, I think.
Yeah.
So, indeed, I mean, we have on one side, as you said, the European Council conclusions from last week, which referred this discussion to the COREPER, to the permanent representatives. Now, you know that from the Commission side, when we were doing these advance purchase agreements, we were very much going for this equitable solution. And now that we've seen that so we're going for the equitable solution of the pro rata among the member states based on the population, because this is something that we see the virus striking everywhere, and that has to be, that seemed for the Commission the way forward. Now the member states decided to depart from the Commission's proposal by adding some flexibility which allows agreeing on a different distribution of doses. And under this system, if a member state decides not to take up its pro rata allocation, the doses are redistributed among the other interested member states. And we've seen that this system has been used to modify then the pro rata allocation that we proposed under the 6 APAs. Now, on the Commission side, we are, of course, always ready and there to offer support and ensure solidarity. And this is why we agreed on this accelerated delivery of the 10 million doses from BioNTech Pfizer for the coming weeks. And these doses could be used for the redistribution called for by the member states. And I think this is where we are now for the moment, that we see that we have the different ways of distributing these vaccines on the table. It's now being discussed at COREPER, and we'll see what comes out from those discussions. And we are there, of course, from the Commission side to support this process as much as we can.
Thank you, Vivian. I invite you again to keep your hand raised if you have additional questions for Vivian on the deliveries of vaccines or on vaccine distribution. I see Griselda's hand raised. Griselda, go ahead.
Oui, merci Dana. C'était pour retourner aux doses qui sont en Italie, parce que je me demande, est-ce que c'est juste un problème d'organisation à vous, que vous avez prévu de faire une conférence de presse demain et jusqu'au moment de la conférence de presse, tu ne veux rien avancer, ou il y a un problème de fond dans les partages ou avec AstraZeneca, parce que entre la clarté de M. Breton de la semaine dernière, quand il assurait les doses vont rester dans l'Union, et les questions qui restent ouvertes aujourd'hui, il y a un écart énorme et moi je ne comprends pas. Pardon.
Merci pour relancer la question, Griselda. Effectivement, il est important d'avoir la clarté là-dessus. Je pense qu'il n'y a jamais eu de doute que les doses qui étaient trouvées en Italie, donc qu'une partie de ces doses était destinée à l'Union européenne, vu le fait que la compagnie elle-même a dit ceci, si je me rappelle bien, jeudi ou mercredi même dernier. Donc, clairement, la compagnie a dit qu'il avait 6 millions de doses qui se trouvaient à Catalan et qui étaient destinées pour les pays de l'Union européenne. Donc, maintenant, 5 jours plus tard, nous sommes tout simplement en train de te dire que nous n'avons pas l'information mise à jour sur ces doses-là, si elles sont déjà parties vers des pays de l'Union européenne. Comme tu sais, les calendriers des livraisons vers les pays est différent en fonction de la distance entre les lieux d'assemblage et les pays de destination. Et nous ne sommes pas en mesure de te dire maintenant où exactement ces doses sont et quelle quantité est déjà dans les centres de vaccination de l'Union européenne, dans quel pays et quels autres sont en train d'être livrés. Donc c'est une question logistique. Nous allons avoir l'information complète dans les jours à venir et vous allez avoir cette information de notre part. Vous avez vu tout simplement que le rythme dans lequel nous étions en mesure de vous fournir des informations là-dessus, c'était une fois par semaine et généralement c'était dans la deuxième partie de la semaine quand nous étions sûrs que l'information que nous avons récoltée des États membres était vérifiée et reflétait la situation donc que nous étions confidents et que nous pouvions la partager avec vous. Donc encore une fois, un peu de patience, il n'y a pas de tactique, il y a tout simplement le fait que les données sont en train d'être mises au point. Merci beaucoup pour ça. Maintenant, je pense que Rafaela a une question là-dessus aussi. Rafaela, go ahead. I understand that your mic source is a problem. Now we hear you and we see you.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you. I have a question concerning Sputnik. It was confirmed in Vienna that Russia offered 1 million doses of Sputnik V to Austria, with a possible delivery starting in April. Taking into account that Austria's government was complaining about what the Austrian government think was an opaque EU ordering process, are you surprised that Austria really thinks about buying Sputnik and that negotiations are taking place right now? Thank you.
Thank you. Well, our position on Sputnik is that when we look at our vaccine strategy, the Sputnik vaccine is not part of those vaccines that we've identified there. And for the EU, it's crucial that the vaccines are assessed for their safety, quality, and efficacy. And the vaccine safety is really indeed our utmost priority in this process. And as you know, we are very much have been insisting on that, and that is the way that we've been working over the past over the past months, that any vaccine that will receive the authorization has to be, any vaccine that is here in use under our vaccine strategy has to go through the authorization process following the all the steps that the European Medicines Agency has put forward. Also, what you're referring to, the member states' bilateral action, they do indeed have this possibility under the Article 5 of the procedure of our pharmaceutical legislation that foresees for an emergency use authorization. Now, in this case, there is a very strong difference to the vaccines that we're using under the vaccine strategy, namely that is the question of liability and the full responsibility, which in that case will fall within the member states. And that's a question of national competence there then. So a decision by a member state to grant approval to Sputnik in that case is something that falls outside our vaccines strategy, but it comes also with the consequences that I explained regarding the liability and the responsibility, moving then from the company to the member state. And I can also say that on our side, on the Commission side, we are not in talks with Sputnik in view of our vaccine strategy, and we also are confident that when we look at the supply lines of the 4 vaccines companies that are currently being produced and that have been agreed by the European Medicines Agency, we are confident in reaching the 70% goal of the adult population being vaccinated by the summer. May I also come in here on the question that we had previously on the AstraZeneca figures? And there, thank you, Oliver. Indeed, you are faster than I am at Googling. So I'd refer you here to the website of the ECDC, which has the latest figures, and it shows there then the 18.6 million doses for the AstraZeneca, but this comes with a time lag. This is not something which is as of now at 1 o'clock this Tuesday, but it comes with a certain time lag. So again, referring back to what Dana said, we'll come back with more figures by tomorrow. Thank you.
Thank you, Vivian. We continue with Francesco. Oh, sorry, Rafaela has a follow-up question, so you go first.
Thank you. Vivian, my question was more referring, are you surprised by Austria's solo action, or can you somehow see a connection between Austria complaining about the process of ordering in the EU and now Austria's solo action? Thank you.
I don't think that we can be surprised by actions taken by EU governments. The only feeling that or sentiment that we experience is that of determination. We remain very determined and focused to do our job and to help deliver vaccines to Europeans, the quantities that we negotiated with companies and which are badly needed. So this is the only sentiment which inspires and drives us at this stage. Thank you very much. Francesco, now.
Yeah, thanks again. On AstraZeneca, as part of your conflict dispute resolution talks with the company that you launched a few days ago, are you asking AstraZeneca clarifications on its contract with the UK, given that the British Health Minister last week said the UK has an exclusivity deal with AstraZeneca, exclusivity deal. Now, of course, you don't want, you cannot comment on the UK contract with AstraZeneca, obviously, but if that statement was true, it would mean that AstraZeneca made commitments to the EU that it could never meet, because at least 3 factories that are in the UK contract, the 2 factories in Britain, Oxford Biomedica and Cobra, and Halix in the Netherlands, also appear as suppliers to the EU in the EU contract. So obviously it doesn't seem to be exclusive. Nevertheless, the British minister is saying that they have an exclusivity deal. So are you asking AstraZeneca to clarify that? Thanks.
Again.
Thank you. Well, as you said, we have sent this notice for dispute settlement last week. And when we look at it, what does the notice allow us? It allows us, as a first step, to engage in an official dialogue with AstraZeneca to resolve the conflict that we're in. When you refer to the question with the production in the United Kingdom, when we look at our advance purchase agreement with AstraZeneca, it's very clear. AstraZeneca confirmed to us not being under any obligation to other parties that would impede to complete the fulfillment of its obligations. And this is our starting point in this dialogue. We are looking at it from the point of view that it's up to AstraZeneca then to make full use of its supply line and plants, which are identified in our contract, and to ensure that the production and delivery of a sufficient number of doses is guaranteed. So I'm afraid I'm not able to go into more details on it, but it gives you the thinking that we have behind it. We are looking at our contract with them, and we have launched then, based on that, the steps that you're well aware of.
Indeed, thank you very much, Vivian. And we are not in the business of doing comparative contract law and comparing contracts signed by us and companies with contracts signed with other parties. But indeed, the important element is that no other contract should supersede our contract, according to the wording of this contract, which says that there is nothing which would prevent the company from delivering the quantities that they committed to. So we stay within the contract and use the dispute resolution mechanism in order to get the answers to these very important questions and to get vaccines delivered from AstraZeneca. So please point out at this stage if you have additional questions for Vivian on vaccines and on distribution measures. That doesn't seem to be the case, so thank you, Vivian. David has his hand raised, so I wonder if it's for that, or if he has...
Oui.
It's for that, so Vivian, you may stay.
Oui. Enfin, ou pour toi, pour Viviane. Oui. Est-ce que vous confirmez l'objectif de 80% pour les personnes avec plus de 80 ans et le personnel sanitaire avant la fin du trimestre?
Merci beaucoup, David, de nous rappeler cet objectif, effectivement, que nous nous sommes donné le mois de janvier. C'est que nous pouvons confirmer clairement aujourd'hui, alors qu'on se rapproche de la fin du premier trimestre, et qu'une quantité suffisante de doses ont été livrées dans tous les pays de l'Union européenne pour couvrir les besoins des vaccinations de cette catégorie. Et maintenant, nous sommes en train de voir, avant la fin du premier trimestre, quelle est la situation concernant les vaccinations qui ont eu lieu pour cette catégorie, qui effectivement, c'est pour les États membres. Nous ne donnons pas les vaccins, nous vaccinons pas nous-mêmes, mais j'espère que, encore une fois, avant la fin du premier trimestre, donc demain, nous allons avoir de l'information là-dessus, mais encore une fois, c'est les États membres qui détiennent cette information et nous sommes en contact avec eux pour la récupérer. Je pense que Angela a une autre question. So Angela, let's hear from you.
Yes, thanks. I wanted to know if there is any update on the negotiation between Brussels and London on the AstraZeneca deliveries, as yesterday from Downing Street and also the Minister Hancock kept on saying that they have like what Asher was saying before, contract in exclusivity with London, with the company, and also that they could do without the exports from Europe because they can manage without the exports from Europe. So I wanted to know if there is any update and if you hope to reach an agreement still in the light of these statements. Thank you. And then I have a question on WHO, but I guess I can do it later.
Sure. Thank you very much for this, Angela. So allow me to repeat what we just said regarding comments from the UK on the quality or the content of their agreements with AstraZeneca and the production sites that would be necessary for the fulfillment of those contracts. We obviously do not comment on the statements from UK officials or authorities regarding the fulfillment of their contract with AstraZeneca. This is not for us to enter into discussions on or to comment on. Secondly, the discussions that we have with the United Kingdom are broader. They are not referring to a specific vaccine or to a specific manufacturer or to a precise production site. They pertain, as we have said in the joint statement that we issued with the UK authorities last week, to a broader range of cooperation in relation to development and manufacturing of vaccines, seeking to achieve win-win situations across the whole production chain. So this is why, of course, we remain in contact with the UK authorities. We believe that there is a lot of discuss because, again, this is a process which is important for Europe, for the UK, for the world, that of vaccine manufacturing, and we believe that both sides have a lot to offer in the process. But that's all what we can say at this stage about those discussions. Very good. So I will now invite Angela to ask her question about WHO, which may also be for Vivian, depending, of course, on the angle of that question. So Angela, go ahead.
Yes, I wanted to know, I wanted to have a comment, an opinion by the Commission on the report of the WHO, which excludes the report on the origins of the COVID-19, which excludes an accident in one of the Wuhan laboratories. And if you share Blinken's accusations, according to Blinken, the WHO was not able to investigate freely and independently in China, and the Chinese authorities wrote their report. And if I can, another little question on what we were saying before on the op-ed which was presented this morning by the WHO and President Michel. That op-ed has not been signed by US and China. Could this be the reason why von der Leyen decided not to sign it as a diplomatic move towards Washington and Beijing? Thank you.
Thank you very much. Vivian?
Thanks. Well, we're in the situation where the report has not been published yet by the World Health Organization. So from our side, we can, as you know, of course, only comment on it once it has been officially published.
But obviously a very important report, and you will hear our views about it once the report is on the table. As regards the second question, Angela, I answered, I believe, amply in the first part of this press conference regarding that op-ed. Allow me once more to summarize and emphasize that President von der Leyen has a very clear convergence of views regarding the aims that were stated in the op-ed, which is to achieve greater preparedness to prevent and to tackle pandemics in the future. She's very engaged in, together with the Italian authorities, in bringing the G20 countries together around a sort of a blueprint for preparedness. To be adopted at the summit, hopefully taking place in Rome physically on the 21st of May. And this is all what we can say at this stage. I would discourage you from making any speculation beyond that regarding any other positioning or reasoning. Again, convergence of views about the aims. That doesn't mean that everybody among the political decision makers that share this view would be able to sign every opinion piece in relation to this subject at any point in time. So I would discourage you from reading more into this than there is to read. But this is obviously your prerogative of this beautiful work of journalists to make your own opinion about that. Angela, you have a follow-up question.
And with Joe Biden's participation in the VTC of European leaders, a new transatlantic, relationship was celebrated last week. So, on the basis of this, do you share Blinken's view, Blinken's attack against China? If you can elaborate on this, thanks.
Thank you, Angela. We have no comments to make on the sayings or on the statements of the US officials regarding China and cooperation regarding coronavirus. We believe it's very important that the whole world cooperates to discover the origins of this pandemic and of other ones, and to be prepared to face other pandemics in the future in a better way. But we have no comments to make on the comments made by American officials in relation to China and the origin of coronavirus or anything else. I believe that James has a question, perhaps on this topic. James, go ahead.
Yes, thank you, Donna. I'm sorry, I had various calls come in, so I just wanted to come back and ask my question. A couple of weeks ago, the President of the European Commission said that Article 122 was on the table. It was an option still on the table. Is Article 122 still on the table, or has it been taken off the table? Thank you.
Thank you for that question, James. Actually, what the President said a few weeks ago was that all options were on the table in order to achieve the very clear objectives that we set ourselves. Which is to increase the delivery and to accelerate the delivery of vaccines to European citizens. We are not talking about increasing, indeed, because we have secured 2.6 billion doses of vaccines for Europeans, which is more than sufficient for the European population. And this is the reason why we are also ready to share with neighbors and partners, and this is very much part of our plan. But the problem is that of acceleration. We need to achieve the level of cooperation from companies that is required in order to keep the schedules that were agreed and to speed up vaccination of Europeans to achieve our objective, which was recalled by Vivian, of vaccinating at least 70% of the European adults by the summer. Days after those statements, the Commission came forward with one specific tool, which was the revised transparency and authorization mechanism for vaccine exports, which is a tool that we believe at this stage in time is important in order to achieve better transparency and in order to increase the level of the intensity of cooperation with companies and to address any loopholes in that mechanism in order to make sure that we have the capacity through reciprocity and proportionality to assess in a balanced way whether to grant or not an authorization request. That tool is now working. It is in force since last week. And we will need to take stock to see whether this tool, which was necessary, is also sufficient in order to achieve that objective of accelerating delivery of vaccines. And if that tool is sufficient, we would be very happy to see that accelerated delivery of vaccines. If that tool is not sufficient, we will need to see what additional tools we would need to equip ourselves with beyond negotiations with companies, beyond negotiations and cooperation with partner countries in order to achieve that acceleration that is necessary. I will now invite you to ask additional questions on vaccines and vaccination. If you have any, I don't see any hand raised, so I'm very happy to free Vivian. Thank you very much. And I think that Katalin has waited for a long time to ask a question about a different subject. So Katalin, go ahead.
Yes, thank you, Dana. Indeed, I have a question about the Hungarian National Recovery Plan. The Hungarian government plans to spend almost 1/4 of the recovery grants on the higher education. According to the Commission, is this in compliance with the guidelines of the Commission and most notably with the aims of the green and digital transformation? And most importantly, the higher education is in the process of transformation. Many universities are privatized in a hurry and put under the control of the Fidesz-controlled Board of Trustees, which, according to critics, leads to the deprivation of the university's autonomy. So is this a reform the European Commission is ready to finance? Thank you.
Thank you, Katalin. Marta, join me on stage to provide you an answer.
Thank you, Katalin, for your question. So, as you know very well, the Commission is still engaging intensively with member states on the preparation of the recovery and resilience plans, and that, of course, includes Hungary as well. You will understand, of course, that we are not yet at the stage of undertaking a formal assessment of the plans, and thus we will not be able to engage in a commentary on any elements, actually, which may or may not figure in the draft plans which are discussed with the Commission. But I'm happy to recall again the general requirements of the Recovery and Resilience Regulation. Let me start by saying that the Recovery and Resilience Facility requires that plans address the relevant challenges which have been identified in the country-specific recommendations under the European semester. Indeed, as you mentioned, there are some targets which are also specified in the regulation. So the national recovery and resilience plans should devote at least 37% of expenditure on investment and reforms dedicated to climate objectives. Similarly, also 20% of expenditure should support digital transition. So this is the overall framework. Importantly, the regulation specifies also that member states need to put in place control frameworks that are tailored and proportionate to the unique nature of this instrument. Member states' national control systems will serve as the main instrument for safeguarding the financial interests of the Union. And member states will have to ensure compliance with union and national laws, including on the effective prevention, detection, and correction of conflict of interest, corruption, and fraud. Now, when we look at the issue of education and measures related to this policy field, as part of the Recovery and Resilience plans, member states are encouraged to set out policies for the next generation. This is actually the sixth pillar, one of the 6 pillars which is included in the regulation. That, of course, includes education as well. So member states are indeed expected to describe the main challenges they face in this field and also define how they plan to address it through reforms and investments. And now, when it comes to Hungary, the challenges in the field of education and skills have been raised in the context of the European semester process. You can, of course, consult the country-specific recommendations which were issued last year and in 2019. So, for instance, in 2020, the Council pointed to the need to ensure quality education for all in Hungary. And also in 2019, the country-specific recommendations pointed to specific challenges in higher education, including their low financial autonomy, the regulatory uncertainty they face, as well as concerns over academic freedom. Thank you.
Thank you, Marta. Any additional questions for Marta today on the Recovery and Resilience Facility or related issues? This doesn't seem to be the case, so thank you, Marta. Do you have any other questions for us today on any other matter? That's not the case either, so thank you very much and see you tomorrow.